A big hello to all of you who join us each week for VLGA Connect, your regular look at the latest news and discussions on issues of interest from across the Victorian local government sector. Our program is brought to you by Hunt and Hunt Lawyers, and we come your way every week at this time on YouTube and on podcast. Coming up in today's episode, the CEO of the VLGA, Kathryn Arndt, will be here, along with John Armitage from QDOS Research, to talk about this year's VLGA Councillor Census. It's in councillors' email inboxes now. But how does it work and how will the information be used? That's coming up in just a little bit. And later I'll be joined by the Deputy Mayor of Wellington Shire Council, Councillor Cindy Madeley. We'll talk about life in the Shire and an important ongoing conversation with the community there about financial sustainability. Hope you can stay with us and find something of interest in today's program. But first up, as always, let's check out the latest Connect News headlines. Well, the Victorian Government has released its response to the findings from the Independent Board of Inquiry into the Macrae landslide on the Mornington Peninsula. Minister for Local Government Nick Stakos said the government has accepted all 12 recommendations made to the government from the inquiry report. It made 30 recommendations, including the urgent application of erosion management overlays and improved responses to water issues in landslide-prone areas. The Board of Inquiry found that a burst water main was the primary cause of the landslide and that despite residents raising alarms, both South East Water and Mornington Peninsula Shire Council failed to take effective action. It found they were operating in silos and didn't work together to address the problem. A newly released report has described a culture of toxic behaviour and governance issues among former councillors at Brimbank City Council. Municipal monitors Janet Dorr and Penelope Holloway found that some councillors engaged in what they described as abusive and bullying behaviour, causing mental distress to both senior staff and fellow councillors. The monitors' report has now been released to the public following the completion of their term in June this year. Now, Tony Rownick from Hunt and Hunt Lawyers is scheduled to join us next week. I suspect we'll talk about the Brimbank report and the Macrae Board of Inquiry report, and potentially the Whittlesea report, which is sitting with the Minister but has yet to be released. The Victorian Government has announced a new risk-based flood hazard rating system, similar to the bushfire danger rating system, to provide more accurate flood risk information and corresponding planning and building controls. The move has been welcomed by advocacy groups like Regional Cities Victoria and One Gippsland, but concerns about process and a lack of commitment to infrastructure have been raised by Yarra Council. It, along with Darebin, is one of the first councils to have new flood mapping released by Melbourne Water, with more Greater Melbourne Council areas to come over the next 2 years. A move to have the Lord's Prayer returned to Bass Coast Shire Council meetings has proved unsuccessful, with the council voting 8-1 against the idea this week. A majority of councillors opposed a petition on the grounds that Australia is a secular, multicultural country with diverse belief systems. Glen Eira City Council is transforming how it manages waste with new flexible contracts that could change how residents recycle in the future. The council's Deputy Mayor Luca Ragni said the contracts, worth nearly $289 million over 13 years, were designed based on feedback from almost 2,000 residents. Unlike traditional decade-long waste contracts, the new agreements allow the council to adapt services quickly as community needs change. Corangamite Shire Council is backing community concerns about a proposed Mumblin wind farm, questioning both the planning process and the project's impact on agricultural land. The council is concerned that the state government's approach excludes local governments from renewable energy project decisions. 7 northern Melbourne councils have launched a united front in what they're calling the Connect Melbourne's North campaign, demanding urgent improvements to the region's struggling transport infrastructure. The alliance, comprising Darebin, Hume, Banyule, Mitchell, Nillumbik, Whittlesea and Merribeck councils, is asking residents to share their personal transport horror stories, from no-show buses to gridlocked commutes, through a dedicated website, which is now online at connectmelbournesnorth.com. And a countback to fill an extraordinary vacancy on Surf Coast Shire Council's Torquay ward will be conducted online on the 27th of October. That's to fill a vacancy created by the recent resignation of Rebecca Burke. And that's the latest from Connect News. Joining me now on VLGA Connect is the incomparable CEO of the VLGA, Kathryn Arndt. Hello, Kathryn.
Hi, Chris. That's very complimentary of you. It's lovely to be with you today.
Nice to see you. And we've also got John Armitage with us from QDOS Research to talk about how the Councillor Census is going to be operated. John, hello to you and welcome.
Hi, Chris. Thanks very much for getting me along, and hi to you too, Kathryn.
Hi, John. I can't believe we're a year along.
That's
yes,
right. Well, the last time I saw John
about
was when we were talking about the outcomes of the first survey, and here we are for year two. Kathryn, just set the scene for us. As we said, the Councillor Census started last year. Why is the VLGA so strongly behind this as one of its activities?
Look, Chris, thank you for that question. I think it's an important question to start with. The VLGA committed to conducting this annual Councillor Census. We launched it last year. That was the first comprehensive Councillor Census conducted in Victoria in over a decade. So we see it as a really important tool to gather information through a longitudinal study, I guess, which maps the experiences of Victorian councillors and gives us a better understanding about, what their experiences are, what their challenges are, what are the opportunities for us to support them, but also to inform other levels of government in terms of policy that impacts the local government sector. So we see this as a really useful tool to do that. And we're just really pleased at the response that we've had to the census to date. I mean, it was amazing last year. For that very first census launch, we captured over 300 councillors' experiences, and we see this one as a really important census, the 2025 census, because we have the opportunity to capture first-term councillors and understand more about their experiences, but also returning councillors. And of course, now we have these mandatory training requirements. So we've added some questions in the census around what's been the experiences of councillors with that training. Did it hit the mark? Did it prepare them enough for the role of a councillor? And we can take that into what will be a review of those legislative requirements later in the year.
Yeah. So out of the first census, there was a very strong theme of incivility impacting upon elected reps, wasn't there? And the sector more broadly. Were you surprised by that?
Look, we've been hearing that for many years, but I think to see it, in hard data form, and also with the comments that councillors took the time to actually add into the census document last year, it really did hit home that this was an issue for them. I mean, over 80% of respondents said that they'd experienced some form of harassment and bullying. That's really concerning, but it's been really useful for us because we've been talking in great detail with the state government about what are the programs that we can put in place to support councillors.
And what's that, before I get to John about the methodology, what have those conversations been like, and what are you hoping might come out of those discussions with other levels of government?
Yeah, look, I think it would be true to say that the state government, and certainly the Minister for Local Government, was really concerned to see those the results of the census, concerned to see that councillors were in fact experiencing these behaviours. On the one hand, there are these issues with social media and the way that members of the public use that as a tool to not only, give feedback to councillors, but also to make comments about council officers and the local government sector itself. I don't think we're going to easily shut down social media. So what we're talking to the state government about is putting in place a dedicated support program for elected representatives at the local government level, where we can, offer them support and counselling and advice as to how they navigate their way through some of those experiences, but also build resilience.
And that looks like an expanded councillor advice hotline, dedicated mental health services, etc., which you've been talking about. What do you need from the state, perhaps, to make that happen?
Yeah, look, we have certainly included elements of those in our 26-27 state government funding bid, and we really do hope that the state government will come to the table with that. We all know that the costs of having councillors or councils sort of fall over because of conflict within the council group itself, but also the impact that behaviours or incivility from the public has on the effectiveness of that council group, where councils are having to close meetings to the public or shut them down. They're all threats to local democracy. So this is an investment worth making.
John, so Kathryn and the team at the VLGA have been very clear that the census is being conducted at arm's length from the VLGA. There's anonymity and confidentiality measures in place. Can you talk us through the methodology and how you go about making sure that happens?
Yeah, sure. Look, there's a lot of things that are pretty standard about collecting data in a case like this. And I guess the rules sort of go as the data originally comes out of the survey through the various hands it passes to get into a report is who needs to know what. So our office doesn't even receive the information about who it was sent to. We just know that someone's landed and logged in, and we don't ever match up the sending out information with the data that came in. So that's all. That's pretty industry standard, I've got to say. If you don't need the data, you don't pass it on. If surveys collect phone numbers or something, they're not passed on unless that's required in some way. But in this case, it's a little bit trickier, and we had to be a little bit more hands-on, and we will be, of course, this time too. So imagine somebody has responded and mentioned that they are in and out of suburban council and were being discriminated against because of, say, their Aboriginality. Well, you might find you don't have to do too many sums to narrow that down to a relatively small number of people. So we've got to pour through all of those answers and just make sure that there's nothing that would identify anyone. Even if you could say maybe by implication when someone was typing it, they didn't mind it being shared. That's not the view we take. It's always just very cautious about that. And it's absolutely possible to convey the meaning by just taking out some of those potentially identifying things. Look, we even do that in the data too. So you could imagine that detailed data tables, we don't end up putting them in a report because it's too much data, but when things cross-tabulate different demographic characteristics against different questions, we've just talked to the VLGA about what's useful there and what's statistically valid. And pretty much rule of thumb, if there's not 10 or 20 people in that group, we'd be very, very unlikely to think it was statistically worth mentioning, but also be a bit concerned about confidentiality. So we will definitely be reading them all. Likely only one person will. They will read through them carefully, categorise them, and then select almost all of them will go into some form of documentation, but some won't. Only those that are appropriate to go into the report will be put in there. So yeah, it'll be very confidential for those that would like to say what they're experiencing. And I got to say, it was pretty confronting to me last year. The thing I really noticed, Kathryn, is professional women that I was working with. Oh my God, have you seen these comments? Oh yeah, they're used to it. I mean, there's a bloke sitting there reading some of these horrible things that women have had said to them and about them. I found it pretty confronting, actually. But so I'd really like to hear from them again. I think councillors are people who are always serving someone else. The VLGA is there to stick up for them, and this is a survey, is a way for you to, as a councillor, to tell us exactly how you feel about things.
Was that the most surprising thing to you from a research perspective, that frankness about those issues from women in particular, John, last year?
No, not technically the frankness, just the horrifying nature of, and the volume of people's experiences, the proportion of people that talked about being, threatened, physically, sexually assaulted and harassed. It's really, really awful. Look, I was a councillor way back in the olden days when councillors were little and social media didn't exist, between 87 and 94. And I was there for 7 years. And I think twice I had someone be a bit rude and threatening to me in public. I reckon that'd be twice a day these days, online with bigger, constituencies and hotter issues and the anonymity of social media. So, yeah, that was pretty confronting. Look, otherwise, I think the other thing that was really interesting to really sort of bookend that was all of these issues about, it's such a big drain on your life. And yet at the end, it's really rewarding, and I'd recommend it to other people. So it's one of those things that, and I suppose I probably had that same experience too. It's this gigantic thing you take on. You've got no idea what it's going to be until you get there. And then to just hear people at the end of it walk out of it feeling, or get toward the end of their term last time and feel pretty positive.
Kathryn, it's interesting to get John's perspective of someone who's not embedded in this like you and many others working in the sector are.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And you know, we really did hear John share that feedback last year about, you know, your reaction and the team's reaction to reading some of those comments and the experiences that councillors were facing. You know, I think it's really useful to have someone like yourself, John, who's been in that role years ago, but also, you know, you have that very analytical researcher's hat on. And I think the partnership that the VLGA has established with QDOS to run and facilitate this census is a really constructive one. You know, the issue of incivility, Chris, is something that is a global phenomenon or trend. You know, the VLGA does a lot of work with partners overseas on the very topic of incivility. So we're hoping that through the results of this census, we can build on that work so that we can support, you know, our really valued member councillors.
Yeah. John, I'm wondering, based on the learnings from last year, have you made any changes or have there been any adjustments to how, from a research perspective, the census is conducted this year?
As a general principle, it's great to keep things the same if you can, because then you've got this longitudinal track, but there's a pretty high turnover. So I think, Kathryn, to the order of 60% of councillors have been newly elected. And we had a look at some of the questions. You always do after a question. I wish I could tweak that wording. We decided to do that a little bit. So there's a little bit of that tweaking. Generally speaking, the body of the survey is the same. Probably the big area that we've picked up this time is having a look at that training. This is for not everyone, but for many of them, first time in, they're going to have just got through this year. There was the mandatory training that Kathryn mentioned, plus a range of other things that they might have done or that have also been, you know, put on by the council. And just to have a look at how that went, it's not quite the job you think it's going to be for the most people that get in there. It is different. And I think that my understanding from a VLGA perspective is, well, this is the body that represents councillors, you know, what sort of supports and services, but sometimes just like training and skills. What are the things that you want to get skilled up in, know before you go in, and get skilled up in when you get there? So that's probably what we've leaned on a bit this year. I suspect we'll probably won't need to repeat all that next year, and we might lean into some other things that are topical then. But the body of it about things like how do you allocate your time and lots of those things, you know, what's important to you, why did you run? A lot of that's all the same. And motivations and, you know, all of those sorts of things are still there.
Kathryn, you mentioned we're in the first year of a new council term, so there's a lot of first-time councillors. What are you expecting, I guess, if you were crystal ball gazing, to hear from those new councillors, or what would you like to hear from them through the census?
Well, look, if I start with what I think we'll hear from them, I think we'll hear from them similar things that we heard last year, but in particular it'll be heightened because they are new term or first term councillors. They just didn't really understand what they were getting themselves into and the full extent of the workload associated with being a councillor. You know, and that'll be really useful too, because, you know, it can help inform the candidate training that the VLGA does, but also the mandated candidate training that the state government has introduced. So, you know, we've repeatedly said to the state government that we didn't think the mandated candidate training probably went far enough. So I think we'll find that we'll hear that to be the case when we learn from these councillors that they really didn't understand what they were getting themselves in for, or certainly aspects of the role anyway. What we'd like to hear from them, we'd certainly like to hear from them, we hope, that councillors are experiencing, you know, less forms of harassment and bullying, although I'm not particularly hopeful that that will be the case, just hearing from councillors in this first term. And, you know, just reading, you know, the newspapers, we can see that there are things happening all the time.
Yeah, just on that, you know, we've seen over the past few years this issue bubbling away. It seems to be growing. We've had culture reviews. We've had ministers make pretty firm stands on the issue. Why do you think we're not making progress here? Why is it getting worse?
Oh, that's you know, that's a big question. As I said earlier, you know, it is a global trend.
Mm,
You know, one of the aspects I think about this is that the public themselves don't really fully understand what the role of an elected representative is, particularly at a local government level.
yeah.
So their expectations are different, and then there's that disconnect. So we have councillors go through what is, you know, frankly, an adversarial form of getting elected. It's usually a campaigning on a single policy issue that is important to the people who are going to vote for them. But of course, as we know, that single policy issue doesn't have a place in the council chamber. Once elected, all councillors must govern on behalf of the whole municipality. Now, that of course can disenfranchise those people who voted for them on that single policy issue. And then that causes some tension because they're getting, you know, bailed up in their local supermarket or on the street. You know, we voted for you because you were going to do this, you haven't. And then the councillors themselves get caught up in that process of, oh, but then how am I going to get re-elected? And it sort of spirals. So there are systemic, I'll call them systemic challenges that do impact sort of the nature of that. But I think there is a role for the state government to work with local government to really increase the understanding of the voters about the role of a councillor.
John, before we wrap up, my sense is that this is sector leading, this type of census work. Am I right? Are you aware of similar things being done elsewhere in other jurisdictions?
Closest I've got to that is I think South Australia is getting onto it now. So, and they're having a crack at that. I don't know if I would quite call it a census, but I think that they're having a bit more of a close look at the experience of the councillor from a few different angles, including quite a bit of research as well. Chris, if I could just chip in on something that you were just talking about with that incivility, there's a factor here, it's probably a bit trickier for Kathryn to say, but I don't mind saying, is that one of the big things that comes up is that sometimes often one councillor, maybe more, usually it's one councillor, often an angry old bloke, is the one inflicting a lot of the incivility upon others. And I think, again, it's a systemic problem. It's a bit unique to local government. If someone's tremendously personally bad behaviour in the parliament towards other parliamentarians, the primary mechanism is not the parliament or the law. It's their party that taps them on the shoulder and says, pull your head in or you're going to get pre-selection and you're going to be out. And they pull their heads in. There are mechanisms there. And that, I think that, and a combination of the very localness of local government, these things are pretty personal. You know, that planning permit's personal. A policy issue about taxation is a little bit arm's reach. So combination, I think that's one of the public related issues. It's very close and personal, planning and things like that. But yeah, it's a really, really small number of councillors out of the 600-700 we've got overall. But it doesn't take many. If on every second council, one person is aggro and nasty and bullying, there's not a great mechanism to do anything about that.
Yeah, good point. Good point. All right, as this goes out, I know a fair number of councillors have already completed the census. Kathryn, what would you like to say to those who haven't done it yet? It might be sitting in their inbox. They might be thinking, do I really need to invest the time in this? Time for you to put the plea to them.
Look, please do complete the census. It'll take probably 10, maybe 15 minutes if you want to add some comments into the boxes as well. Every councillor in Victoria, so 642, I think it was the number that went out, have received an email. Check your junk boxes as well, and you'll have a unique code. It's really important to take the time to complete the census.
Well, as we say, it is sector leading, I believe. It's building a very important body of evidence that I know the VLGA will then work hard to use in its work, not only within the sector, but also, as Kathryn said, with other levels of government. So I look forward to having perhaps both of you back at some future stage to talk about the outcomes. John Armitage at QDOS Research, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Chris.
And Kathryn, always great to see you. Best of luck with the census, and we'll catch up again soon.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, John.
Joining me now on VLGA Connect is the Deputy Mayor of Wellington Shire in Gippsland. It's Cindy Madeley here for the first time. Hello, Cindy.
Hi, Chris. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you going there?
Yeah, really good. It's a little bit windy here today, but hopefully the weather will pick up. But
No stranger to wind, I'm sure, down there along the coast. We're looking at 90 Mile Beach there in behind you. It's just a beautiful part of the world.
Oh, it is. It's gorgeous. I'm lucky enough to be able to spend quite a bit of time down at Sea Spray with my family over the summer. So yeah, we're very lucky.
Yeah, and you still have wards in Wellington, don't you? You've got, I think, 3 multi-member wards, and you're in that coastal part?
Correct. Yeah. So we underwent a ward review last year. So we're still 3 wards, 3 councillors per ward. The coastal ward, we're looking at renaming it because it doesn't anymore encompass just the coast.
Yeah.
There's quite a bit of inland sort of farmland as well. So whether we rename that in the future, time will tell. But yeah.
So we're going to talk about a conversation that's being led with your community around really where do we go from here in terms of the way councils are funded. But before we get to that, I just want to get a little bit of your story, Cindy, because you're a first-term councillor, and not only that, straight into the deputy mayor position. What's your background? How do you come to be involved in local government?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I often get asked when I'm out in the community, people often ask me, why did you want to run? My background professionally is as a teacher. I was a secondary school teacher, drama and English, for 12 years. And I now work as a speech therapy assistant part-time as well as my local government work. I was lucky enough to be selected to be part of the Women Leading Locally program.
Right.
Which was government funded with an aim to get more women into all levels of government. So there was 120 women from across the state, and they prioritised those that were regional, and definitely those councils that didn't have either any female representatives or not gender parity. So I was lucky enough to be in that program. Coming up to 3 years ago now, which is amazing. And it was just invaluable. And I think that's why I felt confident enough to put my hand up for deputy mayor. I'd had a lot of training. I had a lot of understanding already about local government. And that's how I've ended up here. But for me, the reason for running was about community. I've got a strong community service background through Rotary, our local community garden. It's just about making sure. And my goal is to hopefully leave Wellington Shire in a better place than when I started. So.
Oh, terrific. Well, do you think you'd be there if it wasn't for that Women Leading Locally program? Was that transformative?
It definitely was. I don't know. It's a really interesting question, and one I have asked myself. I certainly wouldn't be as confident about this as I am. There's every chance I would have gone, I won't do it now, I'll do it later. But because of that push, and the really valuable thing to come out of that program is the network of women I am now connected to across the state. Yeah. Which invaluable. And, we can still reach out to each other for support. I've got a number of little groups that I'm part of, and that support is so important as a first-term councillor and a female in this role.
Excellent. No, I think you're one of 4 women on Wellington Shire now, aren't you? What was the balance before this last election?
It was 4 before this election as well. So we haven't reached gender parity, but it will always be one either way. The interesting thing about our election is that 4 women ran and 4 women were elected. So I think that speaks volumes, and I think it's so important to have those different voices on the council, the just different experiences, different opinions, different voices. It's really important.
Yeah. Do you see being mayor in your future, either near future or beyond?
Yeah, hopefully that is the plan. I'm definitely I've put my all into this year to make sure I've taken advantage of every opportunity, and I'm definitely hoping that will happen.
Well, best of luck with that.
Thank
Now,
you.
your Mayor Scott Rossetti recently put out a statement saying we need to have a conversation with our community about how our council and how local government more broadly is funded. What has prompted that conversation particularly?
Yeah, I think there's been a number of things that have happened over the past few months. Definitely the emergency services levy has, brought a lot of things to the forefront there as well. It's just a continuation of being expected to do more with less, and often state government asking us to do things that we didn't necessarily ask for or sign up for. So I think that's where that conversation is starting from. We're also, certain infrastructure that we're developing. If you look at, we've recently done an amazing renovation to one of our local pools. So we have 6 pools in Wellington Shire that we manage and maintain, which is quite a lot. And one of those has undergone a major renovation that was originally budgeted at $20 million, and it's obviously blown out to 23 million.
They're so costly, aren't they? Pools
Absolutely,
to run. Yeah.
absolutely. But we're looking at, in a post-COVID world, that things are more expensive than they used to be, supply and demand. So, we're trying to operate effectively within this world, within the rate capping, making sure that we're continuing to provide services for our community while, trying to be as frugal as we can.
Yeah, yeah. So these cost pressures, how are they manifesting in other ways around Wellington? And what examples are you giving to the community as you have this discussion? Is it an either or type thing at this point?
I think it's making really smart decisions. We deliver over 100 services, so that's libraries and immunisation and and swimming pools and a lot of different services. So we're making sure that we protect that service delivery. That's a priority. We've also undergone a management restructure, so trying to make sure we can find some savings internally, and not at the community's expense. So we're doing that as well. We also do yearly, if not more often than that, service reviews of all our. So, for example, back to our 6 pools. So we do a service review. Have we used that facility in the right way? Is the community using it at the times we think? Where can we save any money there? Even the concept, do we look at privatising certain services just to save that little bit of money, so that we don't have to sacrifice, we don't want to close down any of our 6 pools. How can we keep them all running?
Yeah. So another point I know that's being made is this is an issue that's much bigger than one small rural council. And the story that you're telling, the picture you're painting, is not unusual for small rural councils, is it?
No, not at all. And that's these issues are not Wellington Shire limited to Wellington Shire. They're statewide, they're nationwide. It's things like housing demand, trying to keep up with housing demand. We've also got weather emergencies that are completely out of our control, but we have to respond to them. In Wellington Shire, we do have a number of legislative changes happening around renewable energies, and we've also got some flood mapping and flood overlays that we are having to manage as well, so that the community is protected and their properties are protected. So there's a number of things, and these are all, we can't do this on our own. We don't have the financial backing to be able to do this.
So that's where I think the suggestion is that your residents actually start to speak up, write to MPs, talk to others about this issue. It's a challenging and complex issue, though. So I wonder how practical that is going to be. Are you seeing people responding to that?
Look, we are. There will be certain pockets of the community, definitely, that are more passionate than others. And I think sometimes people, they don't know the levers that they possess to make change. Often we always say at local government, we're sort of the most accessible. So we do have people coming to us first, but there are other levels of government that they can get to, and they can ask for help, raise awareness. We're lucky to have both the state and federal members of parliament that are fantastic. We've got Danny O'Brien and Darren Chester, and they are both so open to listening to the community and doing what they can. You know, we all operate within restrictions over what we can and can't do. But I think it's important for the community to know that they do have a voice, and the louder, I guess, those voices can be, the more chance we might have of a positive outcome.
Yeah. Okay. Well, all power to you with that conversation, and let's hope it bears fruit. What has borne fruit recently is a relationship with one of your neighbours and others around this renewable energy growth. You touched on it there a moment ago. Nearly $5 million, I think, was the announcement.
4.7. Yep.
Yeah. So what is that money going to unlock?
Yeah, so that is the $4.7 million grant that we got from RPPP that we are sharing with South Gippsland Shire and also Rumyuck. So, not Rumyuck, that was
Gunaikurnai Land and Waters Aboriginal Corporation.
Correct. Yep. Sorry. So that was in partnership with South Gippsland and Glawak. So that is for planning. We're going to be home to Australia's first offshore wind here in Gippsland. So it's making sure we have the infrastructure, even from a roads point of view, housing, drainage, all these things that we need to look at. So that's about making sure that our areas and our local government areas are ready for these changes. So we need to do that work beforehand to know what we need, because we don't know what we don't know. So this is all about planning to be ready.
But I guess the ambition here is it's going to unlock jobs, industry investment, but it's going to bring us back to some of those other issues you talked about: housing, infrastructure, etc. The list goes on.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to meet with Minister Bowen when I was in Canberra recently, and I said to him, we don't want to become another Wonthaggi. We don't want our local people to be priced out of their homes, and we need to be talking about it now. It might be 3, 4, 5 years away before it's really impacting, but we need to be planning for it now.
Yeah.
We need to make sure, like you said, we want to get the most out of these new industries. We want local people in jobs. We want, our communities to benefit economically. So we need to plan for it now.
Yeah. So in some ways, it's exciting times ahead for Wellington Shire. And I want to thank you. Before we started recording, you gave me some travel tips. I'm heading your way. I've got a short break coming up in Tara Valley, and you've told me about the artwork, the murals in Yarram. So I'm going to have to make sure we stop and look at those. That's in your ward.
Yes, and we also have a fantastic tourism campaign in Wellington Shire called The Middle of Everywhere. So make sure there's an app for that, and that will give you information about everything. So look, Wellington is it's a great shire. I'm so lucky to live here. It's a beautiful place. So yeah, I hope you enjoy your time here.
I'm sure we will. And thanks for the tip. The Middle of Everywhere. I love that. Great slogan.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Cindy, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for coming on the show, and we hope to catch up with you again in the not too distant future. All the best.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Chris.
That's Councillor Cindy Madeley, the Deputy Mayor of Wellington Shire Council. Well, that's just about it for this week's VLGA Connect. As I mentioned at the top of the show, Tony Ranick is due to join us next week, and we've got a building list of things to get his insights on, so you won't want to miss that one. Thank you to Kathryn, Arndt and John Armitage for shedding light on how the Councillor Census from the VLGA will work, and also to Cindy Madeley, my other guest today here on VLGA Connect. Good to have your company. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or on your podcast player to make sure you don't miss future episodes, and we'll see you again soon with more VLGA Connect.